Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Moving Up the Ladder, Learning from Current SSAOs, hosted by Mid-Level Community of Practice at ACPA. Mid-Level Community of Practice was created 3 years ago to provide a home for mid-level professionals within student affairs. There has always been a need for more programs, events, dialogues, opportunities for research geared towards middle-level professionals. We have some great webinars and opportunities lined up for you in this upcoming year. Please keep a close eye on our ACPA listserv and the MLCOP Facebook group for future opportunities. Today's discussion will revolve around current mid-level professionals who are interested in moving up to become the next SSAO at an institution. Have you ever wondered what your supervisor would like to see you be doing to achieve your potential and be ready to take on the higher levels of responsibility? Listen and ask questions to a group of current student affairs officers who will provide insight into what you can do to achieve your next career goal. Make a positive impression at your institution in ways you can move up the ladder to achieve your professional goals. We encourage you to participate along this presentation through the Twitter hashtag ACPA Mid-Level and/or write your questions in the webinar chat box and question box. We will do our best to cover these questions and/or comments. Today's webinar is moderated by Dr. Laura Bayless, who is the current Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, University of Wisconsin-Platteville, and your current ACPA Member-at-Large Senior Level for the Governing Board. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Bayless and her colleagues.
Thank you so much, Nikki. We are delighted to be here today. And without further ado, I think I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their path to becoming the Chief Student Affairs Officer at their institution. So why don't we start with Heidi Levine?
Thank you, Laura, and welcome everybody. I have been working in student affairs since the mid-1980s and spent most of my career working as a counseling psychologist at small and mid-level institutions, both public and private, and moved into a Dean of Students position at a small residential college 7 years ago, which gave me an outstanding opportunity to test out whether or not I liked being in more of an administrative position as opposed to the direct service I had been doing. And that led me to my current position, which is Vice President for Student Development at Simpson College, which is a small residential college right outside Des Moines, Iowa. And I have been here all of 3 months. I started my position in mid-June, so I think I'm the newest of the folks on the panel.
Thank you very much, Heidi. And let's go with Duane Todd next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Duane Todd. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs at Columbus College of Art and Design in Ohio. We're a small, private, nonprofit liberal arts college focusing on visual art and design. So we have about 1,200 students right now, almost all traditionally aged. We have a graduate program, but it's small. And we house about a third of our student body right now. We're downtown Columbus, so we're an urban campus as well. My background involves lots of different types of institutions. I went to a fairly small private college in Alabama called Stanford University for my undergrad, and then decided to go to seminary. I thought that was where I was supposed to be working vocationally, and while I was at seminary in Texas, I started working at TCU, Texas Christian University, as a hall director, and light bulbs began to come on for me immediately in terms of a connection with what I really wanted to be doing in life, which was being in a helping profession in some capacity. And higher ed was the opportunity for me that I didn't even know existed early in my career. So I did finish a seminary degree, but had no intention of working in a ministerial role, and instead have worked in higher ed since 1994. So I've been at TCU for about 5 years, and then I moved back to Ohio, where I'm from, and worked at an adult learner institution called Franklin University down the street from where I am now. And then in 2001 was hired by CCAD to start their student affairs program. So I've been here now for 14 years and have loved almost every day. Not every day, but almost every day.
I hear you on that. It's a great job to love almost every day. I'm with you. I can't say the entire every day, but excellent. Thank you very much. Jane Burnell, how about you go next?
Hi, Jane Brownell. I'm Vice President for Student Affairs at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. I am coming on closing 2 years in the role. It'll be 2 years March 1st. And that has gone so fast, I can't even believe it. I have worked in a range of student affairs areas and institutions. Almost everything has been East Coast. This is my first experience moving to the Midwest, which is actually a big deal in terms of this conversation and being able to move and relocate to do this work. So after working outside of higher ed right out of college, I've been in the field since '94 and have worked in student leadership, student activities, student government, wellness education, residence life. I did a long time in academic advising, was an assistant vice president at Hofstra University on Long Island, and moved to this role nearly 2 years ago. Glad to be with this crew today.
Thank you, Jane. We're happy to have you as well. And then our final panelist is Zeb Davenport. Zeb, introduce yourself.
Hi, so yes, I'm Zeb Davenport. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, IUPUI. I've been here for I'm into my 5th year. Prior to being the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs here at IUPUI, I was the Vice Chancellor at Northern Kentucky University, where I served as VP of Student Affairs for 4 years. And then prior to that, I was at James Madison University as an Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs. I've worked in and or supervised nearly every unit traditionally. When we talk about student affairs, traditionally, I've either had a direct experience or supervised those individuals who have directed those traditional areas in student affairs. And I can say without a doubt that I love my profession, my work, and my calling. And as 2 of my colleagues have already mentioned, sometimes the days get challenging, but the good far outweighs the bad. So I'm glad to be here and excited to be a member of such an esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as you all can see, it's a panel that's been intentionally designed with different types of institutions, different length of time in the job, different urban, rural, those kinds of things. And you'll see that there's a lot of similarities to the position on different campuses, and then some things that are different as well. We had a really good time putting together the questions that we were going to talk about. And one of the things that we discussed is that it isn't always clear what is the reality, what's the true day-to-day nature of the SSAO position. So we thought we might start with a little bit of that. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share 1 or 2 myths or facts that they want to make sure people understand about the nature of the position. And one little aside before we turn it over to that, I'm going to be paying attention to the back channel that's happening on Twitter. And so if I look this way or whatever, it means that I'm just trying to pay attention to those kinds of things so that we can work your comments and questions in. I'll be looking at the chat box, and I'll be looking at the Twitter feed. And don't forget that the hashtag is ACPA midlevel. All right, who wants to start with some of the myths and facts about the position? How about Duane? Let's start with Duane.
Okay. Well, I jotted a couple of notes this morning about what I would consider to be some misunderstandings about the role for people who aren't in it. And one of those, I think, is that people assume that those who are SSAOs are experts in everything that they oversee. Mm-hmm. And that is certainly not the case with me or most SSAOs that colleagues that I know. We have to be well-versed enough and conversant enough in order to lead and to manage those areas properly, but I would never consider myself an expert in most of the areas that I oversee, and those SSAOs who think that they are experts in every area they oversee, to me, are kidding themselves and might be leading in sometimes some damaging ways with people who truly are the experts in those areas. So the one myth that I would want to dispel is you don't have to know everything about everything you supervise in order to be at a senior level. And the other would be that the SSAO role does carry power and privilege with it. There's no doubt about that on most campuses. But just because of that doesn't mean that when you say it, it happens. So there are a lot of soft skills that SSAOs need in order to actually make change happen and to make initiatives happen that that require, in some cases, negotiation, a lot of emotional intelligence, and some, sort of political acumen in order to actually make it happen, even within people in your own division that you officially oversee. But doesn't necessarily mean that because you snap a finger, it happens that quickly or that willingly. So so there's a with the power. I mean, the power is not quite as absolute as I think a lot of people may assume that it is.
Yeah, those are really important points, I think. Who wants to chime in with some of their observations?
I think, go ahead, Heidi, you were going to say something. I was going to say that I wanted to follow up with Duane's comment because, first of all, I agree with everything he's said. I won't add any. I'll leave some space for my two other colleagues on the panel. But the one piece that I would like to comment about is Duane mentioned that we need to have this skill set, and you labeled it soft skills. And the only thing I'd like to say about that is I often say that those are hard skills because when you talk about communication, when you talk about interpersonal, intrapersonal, critical thinking, those are hard skills to teach and hard skills to learn. And so I would just call them life skills versus soft skills, but you're exactly right. We need to be able to have a solid command over those things that most people would call soft, when in fact they're very difficult and very hard.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that Duane's comments made me think about is that I think sometimes there's a perception that our role around the cabinet table or president's council or chancellor's council or whatever you call it on your campus is primarily to serve as an advocate for the division. And while that certainly is one of the pieces that I see is important in the role, that advocating for students, advocating for student affairs or student development, that it's so important to be able to also to look at issues from an institutional perspective, and sometimes to be looking at issues from the perspective of the senior academic officer or another one of my colleagues around that table. That I think Duane had talked about the political acumen that's necessary, and that part of it is being able to step back and not simply be addressing issues from just one vantage point, but to be able to look for opportunities to partner and to have that broader perspective.
Yeah, Heidi, that's actually a lot of where I was going to go with it, that people are always calling me Vice President of Student Affairs, and I correct that it's Vice President for Student Affairs, and I think that that distinction is we are really Vice Presidents of the university that our focus is on student affairs. And I don't think that I really had as much of an appreciation as I should have walking in the door that I am very much focused on the university as a whole, and then student affairs, and most importantly, students' role within it. But it is a university officer, and I probably spend as much time, if not more time, with people outside of student affairs than I do within student affairs. And that's a big adjustment and a big difference from any other role in our division.
I think that those are really important observations about being effective within the division and outside the division. In my opportunity to be SSAO here and at a couple of other campuses, I actually had to grow into that as an SSAO. And I was someone who had a fairly wide perspective, not only just my departmental perspective as I was coming up through the ranks. But I'd be interested from the panel to hear what is it, what are the experiences that you felt were particularly helpful in preparing you to be successful in this role? And we've got some of the myths and facts out there. You may want to talk about some of the other skills, you know, that come into play in the role, so that you can say, well, it's really important that I also do X, Y, or Z, and here's how I prepared for it.
Well, in my background, I had 2 years as a faculty member at Franklin University, and that was as assistant chair of the MBA program. And it started as an administrative role that really turned into about half-time teaching and half-time administrating. But I was hiring adjuncts and supervising their work, evaluating their work. I was writing curricula. I was recruiting to the program. I was evaluating applicants to the program, and all of the things that academic administrators do. And while that institution wasn't a great fit for me, the experience was invaluable, and really appreciating our academic colleagues in academic affairs who do this all day long, and the experience of both, sort of maintaining academic quality and, with, of course, my student affairs lens on from my background, but having that experience of teaching, half of my time, really opened up for me a better understanding of what the demands are of a faculty member. And I think that has been important for me coming into an SSAO role, to really appreciate the work that is done on the academic end. This student affairs, academic affairs thing we talk about sometimes too often, in my mind, is it's like screaming into the wind. It's a ridiculous conversation. It doesn't go anywhere. And I don't even allow my staff to engage in that during staff meetings. It's pointless because we're all working on the same things. We just have different roles at the institution, and so that's been an experience that's been very helpful to me as an SSAO, because I think I bring credibility to my role, having been in the academic affairs area for a short while. That's one thing I would add in.
I think about the time that I spent at one of the SUNY campuses in Western New York. I was the director of health and counseling at SUNY Geneseo, and was brought there specifically to lead as those two departments were merged into a single unit. And that experience taught me a great deal, both in terms of things that I felt like I did really well, and also the places where if I had it to do all over again, there are things I would do really differently. But it taught me a tremendous amount about leading change, and about engaging staff in looking forward and being invested in creating a vision for the future, and using that as a vehicle to help drive change. It was also a place where I had to make some challenging decisions about staffing, something that I've had the opportunity to revisit in subsequent positions, and so I was very thankful for that earlier opportunity to learn how to look at evaluating staff size, making decisions about how and when you might need to reorganize or even cut staff, and again, continuing to lead through a process that is painful for everybody. I mean, painful for the decision maker, painful for folks that may be losing jobs, and also painful for the folks that are left needing to pick up the pieces and figure out how we move forward, and manage their own feelings around those experiences.
I think I just really benefited from finding roles that demanded a lot of me in terms of working across departments and working across divisions, and starting out in some small schools where there is nobody else to do it. So you join every committee because somebody needs to do the work, but being willing to step up and do it, and working in res life, but volunteering to be an academic advisor, and working in a dean's office, but volunteering to be on crisis response, and figuring out how to bring assessment into anything, whether you were expected to or not. And I think just all those kinds of environments that not only demanded it, but appreciated it and pushed you to be in things. And things didn't always go well. And I don't think you could be in this role if everything always went smoothly. You have to have some rough times to know how to get through rough times, because they're going to come. You
So
need to
for
make some
me,
bad hires.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. For me, it was stepping into a position that everyone said, "Are you crazy? This place is a mess," right? And being able to navigate difficult decisions, having consecutive years of budget cuts, having to lead change in difficult times, and then finding the ability to lead people through different times. In fact, first of all, lead myself through those difficult moments. So as Jane just said, when you do it once or twice or three times, you know what it takes to get through it. But I think those experiences give us confidence as leaders. But if we're listening to the universe, then it also gives us the opportunity to know that we can't do it alone. I think the other experiences deal with things like James mentioned it, assessment. You know, we have to be able to delve into areas that we may not always just automatically gravitate to. Fundraising, you know, development, all those experiences help to round us out. We cannot be practitioners in this discipline only. We have to have, I think, we have to cross, as Duane said, cross boundaries and span across other areas of the academic landscape to be successful.
And Laura, may I share one other experience that was really incredibly important for me, and that's been my involvement in professional association work, primarily in ACPA. I got involved in commission work fairly early on in my career, and I have to say that my ACPA leadership, you know, through serving on what used to be the executive council and particularly moving into vice presidency and presidency, gave me the opportunity to expand my thinking beyond just my campus, but to take a national and international perspective about issues in higher education, to be thinking beyond what was my my specific area of practice, talking and collaborating with people across different areas in which they were engaged, and certainly gave me a comfort with being on a bigger stage that I never would have gotten simply working on any one campus. And I think that's had a tremendous amount to do with helping me to prepare for and get to where I am now.
Yep. All of those are such wonderful insights about the nature of the role that you find yourself in, and then how have you cut your teeth? How have you figure out ways to develop those skills? I've written a bunch of notes of things I want to follow up on. But I've gotten some feedback that some of our listeners would like to hear a bit more about the soft skills and the life skills. And I'm interpreting that as maybe a little bit about how do you use those every day, and then what are ways that you might be able to help develop them.
So
anyone want to jump in? Zeb?
Yeah, so I make a definite distinction between life skills and competencies, right? And these are skills like interpersonal communication, intrapersonal communication, critical thinking. The skills that, I mean, when we talk about being a leader in this field, we have to talk about what leadership is all about. And it's about pulling people together. It's about being able to communicate a vision. It's about being able to listen, reflect, hear different perspectives, you know, just get a momentum and a vision where folks can buy into it. So it's about developing we teach these skills to students all the time. Right, we do orientation training, we do RA training, we do leadership training, and we talk about developing these skills. But to me, what we have to do is become students of that practice, learn what the skills are all about, and look at ourselves from a competency perspective to determine how good we are with these skills and competencies so that we can be effective. And that is, you know, while we're teaching these skills, we should be refreshing these skills as well for ourselves. Without them, we won't be effective. We won't be effective leaders. We can't be.
Mm-hmm. Who else would like to chime in?
Yeah, I just always think about the different audiences that we talk to in any given week. So you have to be able to relate to current students who are happy, current students who are unhappy, prospective students, faculty, administrators, alumni, donors, maybe legislators. You bring in national level speakers every week. You have to be able to be adaptable and comfortable and be able to talk about your mission and your vision and what your students are doing and what your institution is doing to every one of those audiences in a way that they're going to relate to. And so that's something that you build over time, but that you put into practice every single day.
I would also say learning how to manage, live with conflict. That I think a lot of us who end up in student affairs, we want people to be happy, we want relationships to be harmonious, and the truth is that's not always what is landing in our offices. And so learning to get comfortable and to walk into it, because I think we get ourselves in more trouble. I know I've got myself over the years in more trouble during those times when I have tried to work around conflict than when I've been willing to enter into it and move through it and let that process unfold. And I think one of the things that's helped with that is also remembering that sometimes the frustration or the anger or whatever it is that we are encountering from other people, it's not about who we are as individuals. It's about the role that we're sitting in, the place that we represent, and certainly we need to be, as Zeb had said, we need to be willing to look at ourselves and able to look at ourselves and to grow and to change, but also we've got to learn to not personalize everything, because much of what comes our way really, it's not about Heidi. It's about Heidi carrying out the role that she's got.
Yeah, I think these have been great comments. What I would add is that there is no one set of competencies for the SSAO role, and maybe that's a myth that we want to make sure we communicate today, and that there's not even one set of competencies for SSAOs that work at large research institutions versus small liberal arts, residential colleges. It's very situationally based. What is your campus experiencing? What do they need in this role right now? What does your staffing look like, and what are the competencies of your staff? What needs to be done? What work needs to be done? And so there are some similarities in terms of the responsibilities that end up in a job description between SSAOs in general and then SSAOs at different types of institutions. But then there's the often unwritten competencies that are required within a particular circumstance. A situational circumstance of the institution, and that's really what you have to figure out is, what is on the docket that needs to be done at this institution, and is this the right fit for me at this time with what I can offer? Some of the general skills that I think don't get talked about enough in the SSAO role are things like leading meetings. We lead tons of meetings, and there are some people who are really good meeting leaders, and there are some who aren't, and yet that's a if I could go back to the hard and soft skill thing that Zeb was talking about earlier, that's one of those, I tend to think of it more as a hard skill that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of training around and observing around how do meetings get led effectively so you can get something done, because we spend almost all of our days at meetings, and that's true, I think, across the board for most senior level staff, and they better be productive or you're just wasting your time. Strategic planning, communication, these have all been mentioned earlier. There's also a requirement to really understand at least the basics about organizational accounting and finance. that you need to understand how your budgets get put together and how to advocate for what you need and how to talk shop with your business office in order for you to make sure that you get what you need for your team to be successful. So I would add those to the list of knowledge and skills and abilities that you got to focus on.
Can I, Matt, I want to just go back to two things. One, Heidi, you mentioned something that I think is critically important for any leader. First, I'm going to give a shout out to, this is something that's been burned, a shout out to all those folks who worked in residence life ever, because I'm a res life wannabe. I have never worked in residence life, but I can tell you right now, in all of my years in working in this role, folks that work in residence life, that is some of the best training for dealing with all kinds of issues. Those folks, if they understand certain competencies and leadership competencies, those folks make very good SSAOs because they've dealt with it. They've dealt with adversity. But the thing that's important to remember, I think, in this role is that we didn't create the problem. So don't own the problem. Just help to fix the problem. And if I can disassociate from the problem and not make it my own, but work through it no matter what it is, crises, student crises, whatever the financial issue may be, the bottom line is if we didn't create it, but where we get our value is in how we lead through that. And then going back to something that Duane just said, and that is simply there are so many competencies. Where we get mixed up, I think, is that we just think, well, I'm student affairs, and that's all I need to know. But I see oftentimes where decisions are made at institutions where they say, well, we're going to take the student union away from student affairs because they don't understand auxiliaries and budgets. Or we're going to split residence life and housing because they don't understand. We have to know budget. We have to know finance. We have to understand all those things. Because if we don't, then we end up losing. You know, enrollment management, its own area. But where did that come from? It came out of student affairs. Orientations, they all get shifted. Well, that's because we have to be able to communicate across the boundaries and say, this is what we're teaching our folks, but we need to know what it is before we begin to talk about it. We're just not practitioners, we're leaders. We're VPs for, right, not of. I like that, Jane.
I think these are all really insightful comments, and what I find is that it's not, you know, harkening back to Duane's comment earlier about you don't have to be an expert in everything that's underneath your reporting line. Really, it's more about process. What we're doing is facilitating processes. We have to have some content knowledge for sure about some department or functional areas. We have to know a lot about how higher education at our institution or in a state or whatever type of institution functions, funding sources, all those kinds of things. But when we're most effective, it's about the process of various kinds, and y'all have really highlighted all of those kinds of things. We get things done by navigating systems, developing partnerships, creating relationships and collaborations, and that's how you move a higher education institution forward. And to Zeb's point about it's really important about being able to articulate the contributions that student affairs makes. But it isn't only about that, but we have to be able to demonstrate it. Let me throw in a really quick question that we didn't touch on in our introductions. Someone from Twitter wanted to know, do all of the panelists have PhDs or EDDs? So answer that quickly, say what your content area is.
I have a PhD in counseling psychology.
I have an EDD in higher ed.
Finishing my PhD in higher ed.
I have an EDD in higher ed leadership.
Great. And just in case anyone's interested, I have a PhD in educational leadership and policy studies. So let's see. There was a question that came in about how do we build a community of support and a network of resources as we move into increasingly isolated positions on our campuses? What resources have been helpful for us to do that? That's a pretty insightful question, because I would agree that as you move up, the the folks that you can be connected with in really personal ways, it gets more complicated. So talk about that. How do each of you or some of you as professionals have your support networks personally and professionally when it's different than, you know, like in my first position, there were 9 hall directors, all the same, you know?
All
So
complaining about the last weekend.
Can you repeat that question? Because I thought I may have heard it differently.
Yeah. The way that I interpret what the person asked is, how do we find our own community of support and resources that are going to help us both personally and professionally when we're at a position where you're more isolated?
Okay.
Well, for me, I have. Oh, go ahead, Jane. Go ahead.
Jane, you go first, and
think
then we'll go to Duane.
Okay, I think it has become more important at the SSAO role than ever before in my career. I have been in ACPA since my first day as a graduate student and have always loved ACPA and the networks that I found there. But as you have fewer and fewer peers at your level, you know, at your own institution, the more this network, where's my hand on this thing? This network on the screen has become more and more important to me. That to be able to go to conferences or pick up the phone or connect on Facebook and have conversations with other VPs and get their perspective and get their support. Boy, I really rely on that. And it's also, it is incredibly important, whatever position you are in right now, maintain those relationships, value those relationships. You know, I had a conversation this weekend with someone I was an RD with 20 years ago, and I still rely on her support. And those relationships are so important.
Yeah, my comments would be similar. My professional associational relationships are golden to me. Almost all of my professional service has been in ACPA, and that's because that's where I sort of grew up professionally, and my relationships are within ACPA, the people who are there. Some of these folks are not just close professional colleagues; they're some of my best friends in life, and we will remain that way. Last month I spent a weekend with 4 of them. We do this every year. We go to someone's house each year and just spend a weekend with each other, talking about our work, talking about doing a lot of personal reflection. And these are all ACPA colleagues. Three of us are vice presidents. One is a former vice president, and one is a director of counseling. And it's just an opportunity to be in a safe place to talk about what you're challenged with at work and where you feel vulnerable, where you feel you need some growth, and you use these people to help you sort of zone in on where you need to focus your attention. And then you take advantage of these opportunities like this. Before everyone got on the call, Zeb and I apparently were on a different schedule for this because we logged in about half an hour early. And it gave us a chance for 30 minutes, just to talk about some stuff. I needed to run some things by him on some professional issues. And you take advantages of those opportunities because when you're on your campus in this role, you're never just another person in the room. And
that's right.
That's something you always have to live with, is the fact that you're never just, even among people on your team or at your campus that you're very, very close with, you're still never just another person there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was told by my mentor, who was a longstanding VP, that the higher you go, the lonelier it becomes. And he said to me something that really, this was many, many, many years ago, and it stuck with me. In fact, I used to think it was just like, why would you even say something so harsh? But I used to want to be friends with everybody, right? And he pulled me aside and said, Zeb, you can be friendly with people, but you can't befriend everybody, because the higher you go, he said, the seat gets lonely, and there are things that you say you can never separate being a VP. As much as you want to be the nice guy and the friendly person, at the end of the day, your jokes are really not as funny as you think they are because people are laughing at the VP before they're laughing. You know, you go and ask somebody out to lunch, of course they're going to say yes, not because you're this great person, but because you're the VP. And I thought, man, this guy's crazy. But the fact is, I see my colleagues, you can't separate. You cannot separate that. And in fact, if we forget that, then we will cause ourselves and others harm. Now, that does not mean we go around and mistreat people. We still have to treat people fair, be honest, be consistent, but understand that we can't bounce everything off of everybody, because then it becomes, well, the VP said this. And so our networks get smaller and smaller. And just like Duane said, you know, you grab a colleague and say, I need to ask you a serious question. I did that on the way to work this morning. I've got to approach somebody about a matter, and I need to know if this is the right approach. And that person said, it's not the right approach, Zeb. So we have to be selective, and it's just the nature of the animal. It gets smaller and smaller.
Are there other suggestions beyond our professional association colleagues? You know, are there ways that we find sources of support for ourselves in addition to that?
So other than the things that other people on the panel have mentioned, to me, it's also about having as rich a support network in life completely outside of the profession as I possibly can. And I know that earlier there had been a question that got at balance, and so I think this ties into that as well. So like making sure that I am maintaining my relationships with people who aren't in this field, and that I've got good support networks there, that I've got ways to really unplug from my professional life and work world in order to get regrounded in other aspects of who I am as a person, and can be looking toward those relationships to help feed me and to help, you know, and hopefully I'm helping to feed them as well.
And I know colleagues who use personal coaches as just an objective set of ears and a reflection tool to not necessarily to bounce decisions off of, but to really help them process through why are they thinking in the way that they are, and what are some things they may be missing along the way in their professional work. So that would be a choice. I think that would work for a lot of people.
Good. I'm going to switch gears back a little bit to how you prepare. What's the path to move up the ladder to the SSAO kind of a role? And one of our
Res Life. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm getting a lot of love from the Res Life people out there on Twitter. That's why I said
yes,
that.
you are. You absolutely are. I'm seeing that come through my feed too. And I have to admit that the Res Life background is a wonderful training ground, because you are dealing with people, you're dealing with conflicts, you're dealing with content of various kinds of things, you're dealing with processes. It's unexpected, you know, all that stuff. So, and that feeds in really well. The question is, are there areas, like functional areas of student affairs, that are more valued than others if you're on this path towards being an SSAO? Residence life, leadership activities, conduct, or could it be anything? What do y'all think?
So I think that there's no clear-cut path. I think Duane mentioned it earlier. It is really about, I think, being, you know, we have to be generalists, but we have to also be able to hire good people, people who know and understand their discipline. A good basketball coach does not have to know every position, but he needs to understand, she needs to know talent. So I think part of it is getting experience and exposure in different fields, but also hiring good people, but not being afraid to learn what we need to learn about the many aspects of the field of student affairs that make up this discipline.
You know, and I think that rather than having knowledge about one one specific functional area or another, it's important for somebody who's moving into an SSAO role to have knowledge and understanding about broader issues that span across our work. So I think Jane had mentioned earlier about the importance of being able to look at assessment and to look for opportunities to assess and to share that information and to use that information in guiding decision making. Particularly at this point in time, anybody who is wanting to move into a senior position needs to understand what is happening with all of the rapidly evolving, fast-flying federal mandates around things like Title IX and VAWA and FERPA and Clery, and to know what's happening in that broader higher ed and legal landscape. Got to have your finger on those pieces more than necessarily having content expertise about career services or counseling or even residence life, which is a marvelous training ground.
Yeah, I preach the generalist gospel every day, that there is no greater generalist role than a VP role. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, going off of what Heidi said, in addition to trying to really work in multiple functional areas, get on committees that cut across areas, if you are not already reading the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed every day, you need to start reading it, and not just the sections about your own area. But you also need to read the New York Times and the Atlantic and NPR and wherever else you choose to get your news. But not only do a lot of those places have good in-depth looks at different areas in student affairs, but the elections are going to spill over onto your campus, and what happens with financing in your area, and immigration, and Black Lives Matter, and things happening in the Middle East. You have to just be a generalist in life, because every bit of that is going to affect your students, affect your campus, and affect your jobs. So you really do need to have a broad generalist view across the board.
Yeah, that's well said. And that's a bit of a good
segue. Before you leave that,
okay.
I was just going to say this. I know before we leave that, we can all have whatever skill we need to have, but if we cannot speak the language of the academy, if we cannot talk about what we do in language that is respected by our colleagues, then we can render ourselves ineffective. So I think that being able to talk about learning, what we do, what we teach rather than what we do, that is vitally, that's been successful for me, put it that way.
Yeah, great. That's good. So Rachel Luna tweeted at us a question about how our social identities have affected our professional journeys. We've talked a lot about the skills we've developed in functional areas, and also the soft skills or hard skills, depending on how you're defining it. But how about who we are, our identities?
Well, this is a major focus of the Aspiring SSAO Institute, which is occurring next week, and Zeb's one of my fellow faculty members on that group. And it's a powerful 4-day experience of really looking inward to focus on one or more identities that are really salient to you as you are moving through your professional work and beginning to carve out a professional life for yourself. There are interestingly a number of people who really haven't sort of taken that question seriously of how do my identities either open doors or create obstacles for me along the way. And so we spend time as an institute really unpacking some of those realities for ourselves and kind of storytelling around, particularly with the faculty, around ways that our identities have mattered in our work over the years. For me, my identity as a gay male has been really impactful in very specific ways that I can recall over my time. And I won't go into a lot of those right now. I do during the Institute, but suffice it to say that the identity piece is one that you must acknowledge and understand and appreciate so that you can work with it and through it and use it as an asset rather than a battering ram. And we have, I can think back on times in my own life when I have worked out my own stuff as that part of my personality or that part of my being, which is often marginalized. When you have power and privilege in a role like this, it can become a weapon that you might use against others to sort of even the score. And you have to be careful about working out your stuff when you have some marginalization in your life. So that I would leave this with that. It's an important question, and I actually think it's more than important. It's an essential question that you really look at the identities that you're carrying with you, and that make up who you are, so that you can use them effectively and as assets as you move forward in your professional career.
It's something that in some ways related to what Duane was just talking about that I've experienced is sometimes struggling with how to deal with it when other people misidentify me in terms of how I might see myself. And so one example that I'm thinking of is that I identify as woman and as a strong feminist, and have identified proudly as being a feminist since my college years. And I have also been in roles on different campuses where my recognition of how issues around feminism and equal access for women have been called into question by people who are perhaps looking at decisions I've made, or not even really clearly looking at decisions I've made, but are approaching me through the lens of what they're struggling with in their own life. And I have had to really work to let go of what feels like a kind of a natural desire to want to fight with them about, no, let me haul out my credentials and prove to you, what, I need to not go there. I need to be with them where they are and working through their own issues, and not get caught up in this fight about proving myself, because I think, as Zeb had said, every space you go into, you're not walking into that just as you, the person. You're walking into that as, it's me, the vice president, and I don't know if that made any sense whatsoever, but that just got sparked by what Duane was talking about.
It made sense to me, Heidi.
I'm glad it made sense to one person, Laura.
One of the things that's hard in some ways about this role is that you become them. You stop being us and you become them. You're part of the administration, or, and all of the privilege and assumptions, sometimes positive and sometimes negative, that come with that.
Yes, that's it. That's what I was talking about.
So let me ask you all, what do you wish you had known before you started the role? And for some of you, you've been in the role for a while, so it may have to think back. And others of you are really fresh into the role. What do you wish someone had told you? I stumped him.
I'll jump in. I'm newest in the role. For me, one of the biggest adjustments, I lived in New York City, New York Metro for 20 years, and now moved to a town of 8,000 permanent residents in the middle of cornfields when you're not counting students. I did not expect how hard it would be to lose anonymity.
Yeah. And that doesn't.
Go ahead, Jane.
I'm sorry, so I have a really slow connection, so I looked like you were saying something, but I didn't hear what you said, so I'll keep going. I imagine that that is not only true in small towns, but it feels amplified in a small town. That at the same time it gets lonelier at the top, you are more visible at the top. So I suddenly feel like I can't sneak into Kroger and get something because everybody there is going to know me. And so figuring out how to balance, I'm realizing I'm not as extroverted as I thought I was. And coming to some new self-understanding and peace of where I'm going to be in this role in myself and the community. Did not expect that.
I was going to say that this very common, whether it's a big city or a small city, your anonymity, you know, you will be known by somebody. I think the two things for me that said this is my 9th year as a VP, and the two things are, one, I learned this early on in my career, and that was you can't try to be liked by everybody. I wish somebody would have told me, you know, my mentor told me don't be friendly with everybody, but he didn't tell me don't worry about trying to be liked by everybody. And then the second one was, a lot of times in this seat, you're only as good as your last decision. So it goes back to then being fair, being honest, and being consistent, because then that allows you to sleep at night. It allows you to rest at night because you can't please everybody all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One of my uniquenesses among the panel is that I was hired at a director level to build the student affairs program here, and then just kept getting elevated titles and responsibilities over 14 years to where now I'm in the vice president role. And so I've always been, if you want to call it, the senior student affairs officer on my campus. I've always been that at CCAD since I arrived, but my responsibility has really grown over this time. And so in my journey, I assumed that, well, I've always been doing this job. It's just a elevation and title, and maybe another office gets brought in and this sort of thing. When I moved from associate vice president to vice president, I was reporting to the provost as associate vice president, and then they created a vice president role here at CCAD for me. And I thought, oh, this won't be all that different. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And I think that's one of the biggest aha moments. And I don't think that's unique to me. I think that a lot of my colleagues on the panel will say that in a dean of students role or an AVP role in their past, it's a significant jump in focus and expectations between you know, being sort of second in line in the hierarchy to being number one. And for me, what the difference was now I was reporting directly to the president, and I was staffing board committees, so I had a level of engagement with the board that I didn't have before. And I was now, you know, I'm sitting at the cabinet table every time we meet, and having to care about areas that I had the luxury of not having to care about before.
What were you going to say?
Right? Like, I didn't care about IT. I just wanted my computer to work. But now I have to care because it's an important part of the institution. And, you know, if they're not successful, neither are our students.
Well said. We are nearing the end, and so I want to give a chance to folks on the panel to say a piece of advice that they have. We're just about done. We've got less than 2 minutes, so anything you want to add you haven't had a chance to say?
My piece actually ties back to one of the things that Jane had mentioned really early on, and that is say yes. So when opportunities come up on your campus to step up into new roles, especially if it involves working with other departments, especially outside of student affairs, say yes, get involved, and then follow through, because like saying yes and then flaking out is fast track nowhere good.
Great. Any other pieces?
I would say as mid-level professionals, in order to be a VP or SSAO, you have to think like one. So in your current role, always ask yourself the next 5 questions. If you can answer the next 5 questions, then you're 2 or 3 steps ahead. So you present something, you report something, you provide something. Make sure you look at it and you can answer the next 5 questions that may be asked about whatever it is you're presenting, and you're always a couple of steps ahead.
Jane, anything to add?
Sure, really fast. Just don't assume that you have to become a VP.
Mm-hmm.
But do this because it is the right fit for you, it's the right role for you, and it's the way that you want to contribute to the life of students and the life of your university. And if it's right for you, go for it. But don't do it because it's just the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more, and that would have been one of my things is the success doesn't mean always moving up, and so in the hierarchy, and so do where your path is leading you to go, and you'll find your success there. And the other is with Heidi, don't just say yes, but even ask. Do the asking.
Mm-hmm.
When you want the experience that you need to move into a different role, you need to seek it out and then ask people to give you that opportunity, because I don't know what people want to do. I can't read their minds, and I have a lot of people to focus on in a full division. So when you want to do something, you want to experience, come ask me for it, and absolutely I will find that opportunity for you.
Yeah. Nicely done, panel. Thank you all so much. Heidi, Jane, Zeb, and Duane, love your insights. Fabulous. And I want to very much thank the mid-level community of practice from ACPA for pulling this together, and I'm going to turn it back over to Nikki. Nikki, you're muted.
Muted.
Whoops.
I think he's saying thank us for being a part of the panel.
I think he is.
We've had a
I
great
think he may also be highlighting the next.
I think I unmuted
There you
myself.
go. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for being a part of the panel and your insight and words of wisdom. And thank you, viewers, for attending today's webinar. Let's continue the conversation on Facebook or on Twitter at ACPA Mid-Level. MLCOP's next webinar will be December 17th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and will highlight areas that address how mid-level practitioners can help students through a difficult time or students who are going through a conduct process. This webinar will be monitored by Dr. Jennifer McCary and the Associate Dean for Violence Prevention and Resolution, Title IX Coordinator, and Director of Women's Center at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania. Additionally, MLCOP hopes many of you will be joining us at ACPA's annual convention in Montreal. Our open meeting will be on Tuesday, March 8th at 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Room will soon be announced. And Mid-Level Community of Practice also hopes to host a mid-level panel on Monday, March 7th at the convention. We will keep you posted via the listserv, Facebook, and Twitter. If you have any questions, feel free to contact the chair, Dave, or myself, the chair-elect, at mlcop.acpa@gmail.com. Thank you all very much for your time and participation today, and MLCOP looks forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Have a great day.